heart of mine and make it whole. Please remember me, my tiny words and what they mean. And I will find a way to make it all okay with my heart in your hands and heart. I will find a way to make it all okay with my heart in your hands and heart. I'll find a way.
Now we would like to introduce our second panel at this time. Shannon Forsythe is the co-founder and executive director of Run to Rescue. Shannon began her ministry work as director of a theatrical outreach called Fashion Forward, and later went on to become general manager of Far-Reaching Ministries. She did crisis management for the missionaries in the field, as well as working with women whose children had been kidnapped by the LRA. Run to Rescue rescued their first girl in June 2012. After helping multiple girls in 2013, they launched their Anchors of Hope project in 2014, where they train up teams to work with just one girl. From her work with Run to Rescue, Shannon has been featured in People magazine and a number of other magazine and online resources. Run to Rescue is now a part of a multiple counties human trafficking task force, as well as sitting on the CSEC steering committee in Riverside County. Sipra Namit was born in Leeds, England, and came to Los Angeles in 1974. She is a former elementary school teacher and has been a volunteer and board member of the National Council of Jewish Women, Los Angeles, for over 15 years. She is a past president and currently the VP of Legislative and Community Engagement. In that role, she serves on numerous committees, including the SB 1193 Implementation Outreach Project, which began February 2014. Guido Hygienist. As an engagement coordinator, Guido manages our programs in Southern California and engages the region in efforts against child exploitation and trafficking. His work includes fundraising, developing a base of interns and volunteers, and providing training for educators, law enforcement, and local community members. He also actively communicates our solutions at conferences, house media events, university campuses, and in the various sectors that intersect with vulnerable and victimized youth. He also acts as a strategic partner for Truckers Against Trafficking and has empowered the trucking industry to engage this issue in the most impactful way. He launched the Southern California branch of I Empathize in April of 2011.
Natasha Ashley occupies multiple roles with Restoration Diversion Services, a nonprofit organization of women who volunteer their time to assist victims of sex trafficking in exiting the life of prostitution. Primarily, Ms. Ashley served as a case manager responsible for intake of survivors, and as a group facilitator, she also provided workshops that seek to educate, heal, and support survivors. As a survivor of sex trafficking and addiction, she comes to this work with compassion, strength, and direct insight. Ms. Ashley embraces her story and uses her experiences to positively influence lives and progress the conversation of sex trafficking, abuse, and addiction. In 2008, Ms. Ashley became a registered addiction specialist. And since then, she has dedicated her personal and professional life as an advocate for holistic support of disadvantaged and underrepresented communities. Prior to her work with Restoration, Ms. Ashley served as an alcohol and drug counselor for West Coast Counseling and Healthcare Dual Diagnosis, where she also raised awareness of sex and human trafficking to at-risk youth and adults with substance abuse. Everyone, please welcome Natasha Ashley.
I would like to call all our panelists to the stage and Shannon Forsythe to the podium.
First of all, I just want to say thank you to Anika and just the USC team just to have this symposium. It is really remarkable, and the speakers that have been here have been exceptional. So I just want to thank you for allowing me to be here. Run to Rescue is an organization that rescues and restores victims of sex trafficking. Our reach is to identify the victim, and our rescue is what it seems like. We go out and we'll rescue the girls. Most of the time we get those from moms whose children are runaways, and they're saying, my daughter is missing, and she ran away, but she's just considered an endangered runaway. So we start getting online. We have a research team. Sometimes we'll go out there, and we just actually was in Las Vegas yesterday, picked up a girl. She had her trick, and she got in our car right after so she could get away, and we brought her home last night. So, and our last, of course, is our restoration. We have a year-long program, and as they had stated earlier, we started and launched this year our Anchors of Hope project, which is training up teams of people to work with one girl. And that has been, we've seen just wild success with that. So, go ahead and go to the next slide. And go on to the next one. I know that you have heard already what sex trafficking is. The legal definition of sex trafficking is the recruitment, the harboring, the transportation, the provision, or obtaining of a person for the purpose of a commercial sex act. That is the legal definition. To be able to prosecute a case, the law enforcement needs to prove force, fraud, and coercion for those girls that are over 18. If you heard earlier, if they're under 18, our laws have changed that they are immediately a trafficked victim. Who's being trafficked? That's always the question. Everyone wants to be able to know who's being trafficked. Anyone is going across all borders. We have seen it in our church. We have seen it in the schools. We have seen it at the malls. We have seen it at Disneyland. And these are our firsthand experiences just with us. And so go back just for a minute. That picture right there when we first started about 3 years ago was taken from a pimp's phone. And he stated, we were looking for another girl, and he stated that she was 18. You tell me how old she is. And so the average age of entry into prostitution for a minor is 12. That is what is stated. I believe it's getting younger. That's my own personal opinion. Who's vulnerable? So I want everyone just to take a moment here, especially you ladies out here, maybe even some of you boys, and I want you to start thinking, do you know anyone that fits this description? Okay, the vulnerable are those who have experienced sexual or physical abuse in the past. I guarantee you 50% of you women out there have already experienced that. Those who come from a broken home. Probably most of us come from a broken home. Those with severe family dysfunction. Those who have been bullied. Those who struggle with their self-worth, low self-esteem, and lack of confidence. Those who are lonely and seeking out friends. Unpopular, feels unloved, often unsupervised, and runaways. Don't raise your hands, but how many fit in some of those categories? So now we're looking at everyone is vulnerable because a pimp knows that, and they're looking to who they can start recruiting based on these traits. And so if you are having a hard day and you're feeling vulnerable and someone comes up to you and starts pouring all these accolades and making you feel worthy, then all of a sudden a door is kind of open and you don't even realize that you could be exploited. Go ahead. What is grooming? These pimps and these recruiters, they know what they're doing. It's methodical, it's thought out, and it's premeditated. So this is something that they are going into schools and churches and malls and Disneyland. They are going to beaches. They are going and they're thinking it out. The process, it's a process of identifying and engaging a minor or someone that's over 18 in sexual activity. It involves an imbalance of power and elements of coercion and manipulation. It is having the motivation intent to sexually exploit the minor. What is the purpose of it? Is to that the perpetrator's goal is to make a victim by increasing access to the victim and decreasing the likelihood of their intent being discovered by others, including themselves. So he's wanting to increase more and more and more, or her, or whoever he has recruiting her, they're going to increase it, and then they're going to decrease activity from their family members, from those that are around them, from someone that may identify that they may be a victim. And they themselves, our problem with our girls is to convince them and to show them that they themselves have been a victim. So, so that is the purpose of what these pimps and recruiters are doing. How are victims approached? We're seeing online, like I already said, it's everywhere. They can be approached anywhere. But the pimp will typically present himself positively to the victim. He will send in other kids their age. We've seen that. Boys and girls who will make them feel accepted, invite them to parties. Maybe they don't get invited to parties. They will exhibit a deep interest in them. Oh, you like music? I can play the guitar too, Do you like art? Do you like gaming? What is it you like? They're going to show an interest. They're very complimentary. They learn the victim's habits, likes and dislikes, communicates with them online, pretends to share common interests, background and experiences. So if you're having a bad day and you're mad at your mom, your parents don't understand you. You know what? You should be able to make your own choices. Come with me. So now he's starting to separate the family relations that they may have, or any positive influence. He's starting to separate that. How do pimps recruit? The most popular is the Romeo pimping. They're gonna date her. They're gonna make her fall in love. We were going to show a video, but because of time, we couldn't. But these pimps will train other pimps on how to be a Romeo pimp, how to get these girls to fall in love with them. Then they'll put them in debt. Oh, look, I bought you movies, I bought you bags, I bought you clothes, I did all this. Now you owe me money. Or you know what, guy, if you loved me, you would just do this. I just ran out. And she starts to feel this. She loves him. She really does love him. And now she feels obligated to do something for him. Drugs, the gorilla technique, which is, they'll just break your bones. We do see gorilla technique, but it's not as effective. The Romeo pimping is effective. Force, fraud, and coercion. So this is how they recruit. Pimps and traffickers often exhibit the following behaviors. So sometimes we may look at a girl, but if we start to learn their behavior, you start to understand what they're doing, then you'll be able to see when they're actually even. It's like looking for pedophiles. How many of us can actually say, we've studied and learned about pedophiles, and you're kind of more aware, because they're going to be close to home. Our one girl, her pimp was her tattoo artist, was a family friend for years and years and years. But he's going to be jealous, controlling, and violent. He's going to be significantly older than the female companions, unless they're the recruiters. Again, the recruiters are about the same age. Promises things that seem too good to be true. They encourage victims to engage in illegal activities. They buy expensive gifts or own expensive items. They're vague about who they are and their profession. They're really pushy and demanding about sex. They encourage inappropriate sexual behavior, and they make the victim feel responsible for his or her financial instability. So they're very open about financial matters, and they put that burden back on the victim. And so now it's her fault that he's where, or she is where they're at financially. So once recruited, the grooming process, you know what? This can take up to a year. They want this client. They know if they can get this victim, not client, to get this victim to come in with them, they could be making hundreds and thousands of dollars on just one girl. So they will take their time to groom, especially if they think that they can convince her to come with them. And once she's in there, then he's going to start making sure that he's going to control her. He's going to show her that he can be violent. So his threats are real when he starts to threaten her. He'll do the beating and slapping. We just got a girl who was burned with vapors all over her face. Sexual assault, confinement, other torture techniques, emotional abuse, renaming. Girls get renamed, They call them Lil Bit or Honey Love. And now their name is their identity is being stripped from them. Creating dependencies. Call me daddy. Now they're creating a false family environment. The removal from familiarity and support structures, document confiscation, and forced sexual education. For underage minors, they will have the kids watch pornography, and then they will practice what they see on the video or online so that these kids can learn what to do when they go out to the streets. Another thing is that one of our girls he was charging her for him training her how to work in Las Vegas on the Strip. And so she was owing a debt based on the fact that he was training her. And then now we have the hard part for all of us that work with victims is the psychology of what they have gone through. There is such a layer and layer and layer of deep trauma. That's why raising up people, you guys that are in college here, is understanding that post-traumatic stress disorder doesn't even cover what these girls go through. I feel like it's a good term, but it's not strong enough. Melissa Farley, she was a PhD of prostitution research. Now, we don't use the term prostitution, but she has incredible facts. She says less than 2% actually make a choice to get into prostitution. These are girls over 18. And I've seen that. None of my girls have ever made the choice to go into prostitution. And some of them have started when they were younger and have aged out over 18. 75% of 55 women who sought help reported an average of being raped by their pimps 16 times a year and were raped 33 times a year by Johns. Someone who's been raped in their life may have been raped maybe 1 or 2 times, but these girls are yearly experiencing rapes. 62% are reported having been raped in prostitution. 73% reported having experienced physical assault while they were in prostitution. And we want to say that they're being trafficked. 72% were currently or formerly homeless. 92% stated that they wanted to escape prostitution immediately. 83% of prostitutes are victims of assault with a weapon. And 75% of women in escort prostitution had attempted suicide. 67% meet diagnostic criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder, and I actually think that's a higher number. So it's these are just her statistics where she was on the streets studying these girls. And so as you can see, the trauma of what is going on just in these numbers. Okay, so people ask, why don't these girls just leave? And here are a few of the reasons. Just keep going. The girls aren't going to just leave. They're scared due to brutality, cruelty, and torture they've experienced. Threats of harm to self or loved ones. I mean, I have a girl who we have relocated from here. Her pimp is being arrested. He is facing life in prison for the brutality and the assault that he had on her. I met her at the hospital. We relocated her. Nobody knows where she's at. Nobody. She was trafficked by her mom at 6 years old. And for drugs, she was in the foster care system a couple years later, was trafficked by 3 different pimps, has 3 different brandings on her body. She has no idea what love and acceptance is. And we relocated her so far away that she's still terrified that he's going to come after her because she says, I don't have family. He's going to kill me. So even still, she's afraid, and nobody knows where she's at. So we're working just on that fear. Sometimes we can't even get to some of it till we deal with the fear that she is secure and safe, and that we've got her back, and we're not going to let anyone know. That's why keeping confidential locations of victims is so important. Just I throw that in. Threats of being arrested, withholding food and other necessities of life, withholding drugs. Because they are usually addicted to drugs. Victim is unable to identify any solutions. We say, why do they leave? But where are they going to go? Because we're not solving the solution. We're not giving them a way out, because a choice is a choice between 2 things. If they can't go home, where are they going to go? They're going to stay with their pimp if they're getting food and a roof over their head. A victim does not have anyone to trust. We haven't proven that we can trust them, or that they can trust us. Victims are in survival mode. They are just constantly, they're just trying to survive. So when we say we want to help them, or law enforcement comes and says that they can get help, they're just in survival mode. They're going to assess how to survive that environment at that moment. She's dependent, again, on emotional, drug, or financial, threats of brutality, isolation. She feels helpless. Brainwashing, big deal. She's brainwashed. She's confused. She doesn't even know the difference between what's real and what's not. This false sense of love and belonging. He loves me. I love him. Stockholm syndrome. They feel positive about the person who is been selling them, and they have nowhere else to go. Again, we go back to they have nowhere else to go. And a real important thing, these victims feel shame. They no matter where they're at, or how angry, or how confident, or I did this by choice, no matter what they're saying, there's a deep sense of shame. Culpability, guilt, and self-blame. I chose this. I chose what happened. And when you start to break down that where it wasn't a choice, then they feel like, oh, I've been duped. How did I? Then they feel ashamed that they even got into that. That remorse and regret, worthlessness, hopelessness. They're just, again, shame. Stigmatization. If someone's been trafficked, our little girl who was trafficked since she was 6, she's 20, what is she going to do? In her mind, she's thinking, this is all I've done, who would hire me? You know, and there really is a stigmatization if someone says, oh, I was a prostitute. It's still there. You know, we still have that problem. Rejection and abandonment. While restoration is important, we also need to focus on their emotional healing. We can't just place them in a house and say, okay, here you go. You know, they're going to be healed. We need to focus on their trauma. And as you can see, there's just layers and layers of it. What victims think they can believe. And I can't go into all of this, but I just want you guys just to quickly look. You know, I'm stupid. It's my fault. I can't trust anyone, not even myself. Love hurts. You know, this is what I deserve. The situation is helpless. I'm hopeless. This is as good as it gets. This is my life now. These are some losses that these girls go through. I mean, imagine everything. They've lost everything. Being normal, healthy relationships, security, dignity. And we can't go through this entire list. And this is definitely not comprehensive. Go ahead. And betrayal. Okay? They thought they could trust someone who then turned around and sold them. Some of them, let's look at our little girl who was 6 when she was trafficked. Her mom betrayed her at 6 years old, thinking that she was taken or sold against her will. And she just is, there's just betrayal is a big thing. And then it turns into anger. And the anger is expressed through jealousy, impatience, suspicion, aggressive behavior, explosive tempers. But it's really because they feel betrayed or they have this loss. So it's really just a mess. And go ahead. And these are common feelings from an uncommon experience. These victims are experiencing this. Now, look at all these things that they're going through. And we have to unravel all that. That's not just one situation. They're dealing with all of these things. And yet, let's not be overwhelmed, because it can be overwhelming. After hearing, this is what International Justice Mission quoted, and I love this. After hearing about the impact of trauma, it can be tempting to think that the healing is impossible. But it is possible for survivors to find relief from the emotional, physical, and behavioral reactions that often follow a traumatic experience. Quality care, including the unconditional love of caregivers, trauma-focused counseling, medical care, and opportunities for the future, all empower survivors to overcome the trauma they have experienced. And so, what are the solutions? We are the solutions. We can't expect the government to come and fix everything. Okay, they do a great job, and as you heard today, they're doing a lot, but we are the solutions. You know, we need to educate our kids, our teachers, our parents. We need to take action. We need to speak out. We need to have more trauma-focused housing. Do you know there's only 600 beds in all the United States for victims of sex trafficking, 400 for underage, and 200 for those over 18. We have hundreds of thousands of victims who need a place, quality care. So we need someone to help us raise up and get more homes. Work with lawmakers, change the laws, go after the buyers and the sellers. And so, you guys, we just want you to encourage you. Don't be afraid. Step out. You have a gift for something. And then this is, if a girl was, I think of my little girl was trafficked for at least 7 years. That would be 2,555 days. She would have slept with 25,550 men by the time she was 18. Go ahead. We need to be aware of this growing problem. There was no room for hope. Hope would only kill me. If they hope and dream, it would just kill them. So they just get numb and they don't even feel anything. But we can be the solution today could be their first day of their freedom because one person stepped out to believe. And I believe that's you. Thank you.
Wow. All of these are really hard to follow. Thank you for inviting me. I'm just honored to share the podium with such experienced people, professionals in their field, and sharing very, very, very powerful stories. I do have an accent. That's what I'm worth. And I'm from the other side. I'm a volunteer. I'm a worker bee, and I can tell you ways that you can help right now before you even graduate. The lieutenant, the supervisor, all the professionals here have said you can do something. I'm going to tell you what you can do tomorrow. So I just want to give you a little bit of background on the organization that I'm from, the National Council of Jewish Women, which is the oldest Jewish women's organization in the United States. It was created by a woman called Hannah G. Solomon at the Chicago World Fair back in 1893. She had been invited to participate in a parliament of faiths. Women of all different religious denominations were supposed to get together and discuss issues of the time. So she hand-wrote thousands and thousands of letters. All the women appeared. She said to the men, what are we doing? And they said, you're serving coffee. And that never happened. So they created the National Council of Jewish Women, which mission is to improve the lives of women, children, and families and safeguard individuals' rights and freedoms. And although our vision and our work is rooted in Jewish values, our advocacy, education, and community service programs are for anyone and everyone. So we're non-sectarian, we work with everyone. The issue of human trafficking in all forms is not new to us. We have been helping victims for over 100 years. At the end of the 19th century, our volunteers met young, unaccompanied women who had just arrived from Europe. At the request of the federal government, NCJW created a permanent immigration aid station on Ellis Island, and then a network of 250 sites across the country, which arranged housing, education, and work for these young women. In those days, we called trafficking white slavery, and thousands of naive and hopeful women were lured to America with the promise of freedom from poverty and persecution and jobs. Many were forced into prostitution both in New York and around the country. And so since that time, NCJW has done its part to help prevent this crime. Today, NCJW in Los Angeles and around the country work with other organizations such as CAST, you heard Stephanie this morning, to help trafficked women and children. We have had in our location, we're in the Fairfax area, numerous panel discussions and movie screenings. We've invited the FBI, the LAPD, the Sheriff's Department, ICE, among other experts, to raise awareness, to share victim stories, and we have had a survivor on staff for the last 2 or 3 years who does outreach to the Spanish-speaking community. We also offer free counseling services at our site. But we know that this crime has to be tackled in multiple ways. So, NCJW and CAST both sponsored California Bill SB 1193. The lead author was then State Senator Darrell Steinberg. And the bill added Section 52.6 to the California Civil Code. This requires specific businesses to post a notice informing the public and human trafficking victims of a telephone number, and there's also a text number, to seek help or report suspected human trafficking. Now, this law went into effect April 2013, but speaking to CAST, whom we work with constantly, nobody had seen a poster, nobody had seen this law enforced or implemented. So NCJW and CAST, together with the law firm Gibson Dunn, who do pro bono work for CAST, TRUA, which is a nationwide group of rabbis focused on social justice, Oasis USA, which is a Christian group that advocates and educates the public on behalf of trafficked people around the world, and the Jewish Labor Committee Western Region created the Human Trafficking Outreach Project. We held our first training for 80 volunteers last year in February. Who is required to post? Bars. That would be an establishment that primarily sells alcohol, not necessarily food. Massage parlors. Adult or sexually oriented businesses, so think strip shops and so forth. Urgent care centers, hospital emergency rooms, work recruitment centers, farm labor contractor sites, truck stops, airports, rail and light rail, and bus stations are all required to post a large sign in at least 3 languages. I'm going to hold it up right now for you. I didn't bring my AV because I never trust it. The poster looks like this. Has anybody ever seen one of these? And you move around the city, right? And you've never seen one. That's the problem. So, the poster's in 3 languages, English, Spanish, and Chinese. At the state attorney's site, you can also download copies in there's 160 different languages. So if you're working in Koreatown, you can put up a 4th poster in Korean. If you're working in Glendale, you can get it in Armenian. Whatever is necessary, we can provide it for you. It's important that obviously everybody can understand what is being said. Since the poster's gone up, by the way, the number of telephone calls has gone up, so we're very excited about that. The poster is supposed to be displayed at the entrance of the business or when you're walking into an airport or into a bus station. You can have a second one, perhaps on the way to a bathroom, still in a public area for the public and the staff to see, or it could be in a staff lounge. But it has to be displayed openly and not hidden by furniture or anything else. The mandated businesses get a letter. Now, if it were in LA, it's going to be from the City Attorney Mike Fuhr's office. If it's another city within the county, that would be from the County District Attorney's office, Jackie Lacey's office, and they're informed about the law and the requirement to display the poster. They're also told that there's a $500 fine for the first violation and a $1,000 fine for each subsequent offense. So theoretically, the city and the county could be making money from this. Before we actually started, we held, it's interesting, we held a poster competition for high school and college-age students. We gave them the text that needed to be in the poster, and they could create their own. And then we asked CAST if they could arrange for some survivors to meet and judge all the posters. And the one that they chose was this one, because they liked the fact that the outlines of the people were in different colors. There was another one this is from Alameda County, so we went with this one because they preferred it. There was another poster that had been used by another county which just showed eyes and some barbed wire, and the victims felt it was too scary and too threatening, and it would put people off from even making that telephone call, which we thought we needed to hear the feedback from that, so I thought that was interesting. So when we do a training, it's about an hour and a half. We give people the background of human trafficking around the world, all the things that you've been listening to today. We have a script that we go through and we role play. How to go to a business, how to explain the law, please hang it up, please help keep our community safe. And we can't say we will come back and fine you, but we can tell them, these are the consequences. We have a way to track every location that we've been to, but we need more help. There are 88 cities in LA County. That's a lot of zip codes. That's a lot of businesses. Right now, we've only been able to reach urgent care centers, emergency rooms, and bars. There's a long, 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 long list to go. Outside, I have put out a sign-up sheet. I have one signature so far. We need 10 people at one location. You can come to us, or we can go to you. We can go to your church. We can go to your synagogue. We can go to your temple. We can go to your book group. We can go to your wine. We'll go anywhere, frankly. But this is our sign-up sheet. And then I've also left on the table for you guys to take, anybody to take a bunch of these, drop them off at your library, drop them off any place that you know where people will meet, because we need help doing this outreach project. As everyone said, everybody can do something. This is something that anybody can do. We will train you. We will train you how to stay safe, because we don't expect, no one goes alone doing this. You don't have to go at night if you don't feel comfortable. We teach you how to dress appropriately and stay safe. So I hope that some of you will take the information and know that tomorrow you can call us and truly make a difference in your neighborhood. Thank you for the time.
Gita, hygienist.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to share a little bit about our work in various sectors that we've worked in, and our mission is simple. We focus on ending exploitation. And to start with the simple definition, with exploitation, taking advantage of someone else's vulnerability for their personal gain. So that sets us up to address all forms of exploitation, but we spend most of our time focusing specifically on child sex trafficking, because we see that as a severe form of exploitation. And we do this in kind of a couple different ways. And first, one of the things that we see important is that empathy is a solution in terms of a cultural solution. Okay, that wasn't supposed to happen. I think that, and this kind of is appropriate too for, students in this particular department, but there's a tendency sometimes where people can see child sexual exploitation as more as a criminal issue than a cultural one. And when that happens, then the mindset comes in a way that it relegates, this issue particularly is relegated to those in law enforcement, legislators, and it's their responsibility. But what about the rest of us? And one of the things that we see as important is that this is just as much as a cultural one as it is a criminal issue, and that it involves the rest of us. That the intersections of exploitation happens in multiple sectors of our society. So it is a cultural issue. And I think one of the most powerful things is that when we begin to then all take responsibility, realizing that each of us has a role. We see that because this is a problem, one of the things that we thought of is that there needs to be an equation. So we came up with this thought, and I'll kind of explain it more, but called the empathy equation. And you can read it from left to right, that sympathy is greater than empathy. Empathy is less than apathy. And now this is, there's three main cultural responses as it relates that we see, and then you'll understand the problem with our current cultural response. But apathy is a minority of our culture. So that is in, where people look the other way. It's disregard for the suffering of others. But the fact that it exists, even though it's a minority, it still gives license and empowers exploiters and traffickers. So the question is, what really opposes, what really confronts apathy in our culture? Now, if you take one step in the right direction, I would say majority of our culture is sympathetic as it relates to this particular issue. So that's a good thing, because that means people do have a heart. People do feel bad for the suffering of others. But at the same time, there's still a gap between the bystander and the problem, that it becomes a passive response. And by simply just be feeling bad for the suffering of others, it doesn't really confront apathy and move towards solutions. Empathy is when someone steps in the shoes of those who are suffering, those who are vulnerable, those who are victimized. They understand the reality of the suffering of those who have been victimized with the intent to enter in, and that's key. And it's not a passive response, but by entering in, by identifying with victims, with the suffering that they've gone through, with the intent to help, then that moves our culture in a completely different direction. And it really moves towards greater solutions. And now, this is important, because what happens is it's one thing to develop a solution, but it's another thing to change culture. Because the more solutions we develop, if the culture doesn't change, then these problems will be, it'll perpetuate continually in multiple sectors of our society. And as I go into the different areas that we worked in, this is a transformation kind of dynamic that we've actually seen in different sectors. And so we believe that empathy is a solution. And one of the things that we see is important is that if we can change culture in one sector, then we can change culture in another sector. This is a trucker. His name is Kevin Kimmel. And I don't know if any of you, just really recent news report, but Kevin Kimmel in Kent County, he was at a pilot truck stop plaza and saw an RV go back and forth a few times and took note of that. It just got his attention. The RV parked, an adult male got out of the RV, and he saw a young girl's face in the small window of the RV. And then all of a sudden, there was a black curtain that covered her face. And he saw that was suspicious. Suspicious enough to call 911. CHP showed up on site, and they ended up prosecuting the adult male and adult female, and it was a trafficking case. And they trafficked a young girl. She was 16 years old, all the way across county. They were there at the pilot station. They just advertised on Craigslist, and they're about to meet a buyer. And I love this quote. Obviously, it's just one part in the whole press release, but Kevin Kimmel says, "I've got daughters." And when he saw that face, he thought to himself, "I've got daughters, and if that was my daughter," and identified at that level, if that was my daughter, someone needs to do something. Kevin Kimmel was, his particular truck company was trained with our training tools, and that's kind of why I'm bringing up the story. And so with I Empathize, we partnered with an organization called Truckers Against Trafficking. And we've been able to train and educate truck drivers nationwide for the last 4 years. And it's been really exciting because we've been able to train up to 150,000 drivers. That's a big capacity, and that we have seen just progression each year. And part of that is a lot of the partnership. I Empathize with focus on the training modules, and Truckers Against Trafficking has done a great job in leveraging the relationships within the trucking industry, having the largest truck companies on board sponsoring training for drivers. And so that's part of this success. One of the things that we've seen in terms of just numbers, as truck drivers are educated to know what to look for, we've seen over 1,000 calls that have come into the National Trafficking Hotline number just from the trucking industry. And that's a pretty large number compared to each sector or each campaign that has been developed around this. And then the other number I always try to point out, that there's been 350 potential human trafficking cases that have been opened up because of those 1,000 calls that have come in that act as tips. And so with the National Trafficking Hotline resource number, that's the Polaris Project, they facilitate that, so it's a partnership with them as well. And the FBI collects that data and uses that to open up cases. And now we have the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children that created a database that truckers in specific regions can tap into, and to know how to look for missing children. So not just girls working the lot at that level, but even girls that are missing. And they have been able to report, just from truck drivers, on average 1 child per month. But I want you to see, part of that success is this, what I see is a beautiful picture of collaboration. And that's also a big solution, as we fight this. We worked in Williston, North Dakota, which is it's quite interesting, actually, if you could Google it. But it's one of the biggest oil booms throughout United's history, and it's a small, remote town. Think of 1,000 men taking over a small town to work in as with the oil companies. And because it's remote, they would bring the prostitution to them, which would also include kids being sexually exploited. And from the latest research, on a digital level, this is one of the highest amount of clicks in a short period of time, which is not that short, but around over 2 years, have come from this particular community. Compared to the Super Bowl, would be like a blip on that particular same scale. And so this is completely out of control. How we worked and approached in this particular area, we had a young man with I Empathize that went undercover, posed as an oil worker, and had had undercover cameras to get specific footage and documentation of how this issue shows up in that particular community. Now we've just developed a 30-minute documentary, which we specialize in film because we see that media is the most influential medium you can use in order to change culture. And so now we turned that 30-minute documentary. We also included a human trafficking survivor who was trafficked. Phenomenal story. She was trafficked in that same particular community. She came from Las Vegas to go into that community because she can reach her quota at a lot higher. And so that particular oil boom documentary, the same way we train truck drivers in the truck driving industry, that's what we're using to engage and empower the oil industry. Same methodology. And that's beginning to also be used at universities where we talk about this issue in that particular area using that documentary. But because we've worked in those male-dominant industries, we use that content, and the next step is really working towards a men's series to address the demand. And that's going to be multi-generational. We open up with the 30-minute documentary. We'll have 5 different episodes, all media-based. It will also be for faith-based and non-faith-based communities, so that should be coming out in about 3 months. The last thing I want to touch on is our Empower Youth project. This is I talk about different sectors that we've worked in. As we notice, this is the one that we're most excited about, because as it relates to exploitation intersecting in any sector in our country, it's going to be where youth are. Not just the public schools, but wherever there's youth. This Empower Youth Prevention Program, it's media-based, simple to use. It's a peer-led within the media, so you hear from 2 older teenagers, male and female, as they have navigated through their vulnerable areas in their life and exploitation. And it's really focused on empowering youth to navigate through the negative and positive pushes and pulls, the things that make them vulnerable, but also what to look out for. Instead of force, fraud, and coercion, the federal definition that we use to describe the tactics of traffickers, we used words like disguise. And what are the 5 main disguises that kids can notice? And as we went through this pilot program, the response was great. In fact, that was the one thing they all pointed out, was the disguises where their eyes would really open up to. I just want to show this real quick, a trailer. It's only 90 seconds that highlights this program.
Please don't push me because I'm over dramatic. Push me over the edge, I'll be in your head like 2 + 2, simple mathematics. It's not my fault I was born into a family of addicts. Pills are your drug, while my drug be erratic. Since his parents are never around, Daryl chooses to hit the streets to take a breath. He starts to get into trouble a lot at school, but with his parents gone, there doesn't seem to be any real fallout to it. Given what is going on at home for Marie, she is relieved when a guy on Facebook starts paying her lots of attention. She wants a boyfriend to look out for her, and he says he'll take care of her.
It's really important to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and to open yourself up to the fact that other people hurt too. Lies are true. You are not what you think you. She won't give up.
Who empathize? I empathize.
That just gives you a snapshot of that particular program. And this is a letter that was written from the San Bernardino School District, who is an incredible story. A counselor went through our pilot program with one school, turned around, didn't tell us, kind of points to this ready-to-use program, and she didn't need to tell us. And she ended up training 15 other counselors, and now they've already been in 4 different schools using the program in San Bernardino. Now, this letter just is a letter written to teachers. It talks about the program and kind of, informing the parents what to expect, and if giving them option if they want their students to not participate. But what I want to point out is the initiation that this particular counselor had. And so this is a program that is being finalized literally like next week. We went through the pilot program, we did all the revisions, and so I just want to end with that point alone, that if you want to help in connecting me with the right people, where we can implement this program, whether it's in a school district, whether it's in juvenile hall, foster care, on and on, wherever there's youth. And so the last thing, and I know I got to end, is our Empower Youth preteen program, and I won't show the trailer even though it's 90 seconds, but this is specifically from 6th grade to 3rd grade level, and that's significant, as someone mentioned. On the average age is 12 and 11, and it seems to get even younger. So we need to begin to connect and teach these concepts to kids even younger than that. This is fully animated, 5 modules, similar concepts from our Empower Youth, but obviously more age appropriate for the younger ages. So if you want to talk to me afterwards, you want to help me get that into schools as well, we're going to try to pilot that particular program in the fall. Thank you.
Natasha Ashley.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank Anika and everyone who had a hand in putting the symposium together. And I want to give thanks to God, because if it wasn't for the mercy and the grace of a loving God, I wouldn't be here today. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Restoration Diversion Services. Our drop-in center is located on the sex trafficking tract of Long Beach Boulevard in the city of Compton. The drop-in center provides temporary refuge, referral services, and supportive services such as group sessions, referral services to mental health, alcohol and drug abuse counseling, anger management, and parenting, job preparation, HIV testing, and at this present time, RDS is conducting sex trafficking awareness presentations to youth in schools, church groups, family shelters, foster care employees, and other organizations looking to get involved in the fight against human and sex trafficking. First impressions. We all make assumptions about people based on our first impressions. First impressions for someone can be very important and very misleading, especially if that person turns out to be a pimp. Here you see many faces of a pimp. You see the gangbanger pimp, the flashy pimp, the female pimp, and the male nerdy pimp. That's what I call it. As you can see, pimps and predators come in all forms. How do you spot a pimp? Pimps can be male or female, although most of them are male. They don't always look like your stereotype. The flashy clothes, lots of gold, or fancy cars. They present themselves as professional businessmen, financial consultants, movie directors, photographers, model agents, and are rap video producers. How do pimps control? Physical violence, promise of marriage, financial methods, meaning they control all the money, use force of intimidation for your family, they alienate you, keep you to themselves until it's time to make money, or even drugs. Drugs. That's how it happened for me. I began using drugs at an early age. I started with marijuana, then cocaine. Cocaine became my drug of choice. And when I could no longer control the drug usage, I needed to do something. And that something was turn to the streets, the life of sex trafficking. I was introduced to the streets from a female who I hung around with. One night she asked me, did I want to go to work with her? So I agreed, only to find out she was dating men for money. So I began dating men for money, so that I can support my drug habit. See, the trafficking life has many roads that I was unaware of. It came with fine print that you could not see. Either you was going to be trafficked a trafficker or a pimp, or a gangbanger pimp, dope dealer. For me, I played all roles, and I suffered the consequences of each role. See, it wasn't told to me, whatever neighborhood you were working in, you had to go by the rules that was already set in place. So when I didn't want to belong to a dope dealer, gangbanger, I was beaten so bad that when my daughter came to the hospital to visit me, she couldn't even recognize me. Or one of the other working girls wanted to be a part of my team, and I accepted. And when they didn't have my money or my drugs, I used any force to get me paid. Or how about when I had the large amounts of drugs and I didn't remember that I had them and I flushed them down the toilet because I was too high to remember. So now what I have to do, I have to hit the track to make that money for that dope dealer. Or the date who wanted his money back. And decided to hit me over the head. Excuse me for a moment. Or the date who hit me over my head because he wanted his money back, and when I fought back, only to be arrested for assault and robbery. Or when I decided not to turn the date, and I had my hands split wide open from snatching the knife so he wouldn't stab me to death. Yes, you see, this type of lifestyle has many roles and have serious consequences. Or how about the dope dealer trafficker that continued to hunt me down and made me become part of his team, and I had to get out of his neighborhood. So I did whatever he said do. When he said sell dope, I did it. Or if he said turn a date and sell dope, I did it. Until one day he was shot to death. I was also shot. Yes, today I walk around with a 9mm bullet in my back as a direct result of being a victim of sex trafficking and drug abuse. So I tell you this story today in hopes that you will not use drugs, and always be aware of your surroundings and the people you invite into your circle. So regardless of how you end up being a part of this dark trafficking trade, regardless of how you end up being a part of this dark trafficking trade, if you chose to get into the streets because of some unexpected circumstances, or you was forced by a trafficker, just know you are a victim. If you make it out of the sex trafficking life, that means you are a chosen one. You have been chosen to help save someone else's life. That's what this is about. How to help save and prevent someone else from having to go through this kind of trauma. I entered this life through drugs and remained in the life for 11 years. June 2015, I will have been out of the life for 12 years. But to the ones who has never experienced that type of lifestyle, if you have ever had a thought that something needs to be done about this, you are a chosen one as well. That thought just didn't come just because. You have to do something about it. It takes each and every one of us to make a difference in our neighborhoods, in the streets, within the world. Not just the police force or the ones who's out there on a daily basis that's seeing this. It takes everyone who have ever had the thought that something needs to be done. You too have been chosen to make a difference.
Right now, we're going to open the floor for a few questions. Because of time, we're only going to ask for a few questions. And please keep them brief. Thank you.
Hi. This question is for Guido. Sorry. So I actually interned for LAUSD, and we've recently started a task force to address sex trafficking in the district. So I'm definitely interested in hearing more about the youth empowerment project. Is it something that LAUSD could do in the future? Is it, and what is it like?
Yes, it is. I did meet with, I think it's the same task force that's addressing sex trafficking within the school district, and where we featured our program, and so there's those connections there. It's a process. At the same time, it's Common Core standards, so that definitely we want to get into as many school districts as possible. So.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
It's great to hear. Thank you.
Natasha, thank you very much for sharing. And to this audience, I hope that someone in this audience will reach out who's a social worker and start working with this woman and some of the things that she's trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Recurring theme among the presenters here was the need to change our underlying culture. And I think of how, for example, in music, there is so much, not so much, but there are some who glorify this sort of pimping lifestyle. And, as a man, I have tried to tell my guy friends, no, it's not cool to say, oh, it's pimping. What do you think we can do to build more consciousness, to push back in terms of, DJs and radio stations playing music that glorify or glamorize this type of exploitation?
Well, we have a problem when it is on Nickelodeon or MTV and it's about a pimp and he's a little boy and his uncle's a pimp. And so we need to start with not saying it's not okay. And so we need to actually speak out. The rapping industry is huge when it comes to exploiting women and even promoting the sex trafficking culture. So, we need to go in there and take a stand for it. We really need to start educating people and start communicating about this more, because it is a problem. And our girls, I have to take away their music because it just draws them back in, and that's who they are. So I literally have to remove all of their music away from them just to give them a season to realize that that's not even appropriate, because they don't even know it themselves. And our young kids are listening to it, and they don't even realize how they're thinking. It's starting to change who they are. So we have Pimp My Ride. We have, and we think it's cool. We all watch it. And, there's so many things that we see just on television about using, Pawn Star or Pawn Store. What does that mean? Porn star. But, girls are being commercially exploited in all of these industries, and we are okay with it. And we need to start talking to producers and executives and saying, listen, you guys are funding sex trafficking in a way, and promoting it.
And I just want to say something about, we have to also begin within our own homes as well. When it comes with our children, our youth, we have to monitor their social media activity. If they're in your house, that's your TV, that's your computer. You paying the bill, that's your cell phone. Be mindful of what your children are doing, because social media is really big when it comes to the trafficking trade. So parents, caretakers, guardians, be mindful of your children's social media and their activity, their friends. Know who their friends are. Know what's going on in their friend's home, because they get angry, and children get angry, and that's when they're most vulnerable, when they storm out of your house, when they're angry with you. That's who the predators are looking for, when they're most vulnerable, when they're angry at their parents or their caretakers. So be mindful. Start within our own homes.
I think it's a really important question. It's a big question. I think one of the things that we've seen that we talk about is how people intersect with exploitation, whether it's different social spaces. So once again, sociology, we've got 3 different spaces, whether it's home, social space, workspace, school is part of that workspace. And so there's spaces that it's pretty overt where this issue shows up. And so that's where we try to, if the exploitation, occurs in that, then that's where we try to empower, educate people within those areas. And with our experience, a lot of times are more male-dominant industries that we've worked in. But we've seen that change, even in the trucking industry, where at first it was like, they didn't see it, they didn't understand the victim part in it. And so the more we worked with them, now you have truck drivers that are advocates. So the culture begins to change from sympathy to empathy. And so that's an inspiration, because if we could just work in multiple sectors where this issue shows up and empower men and women to do something about it, and then we begin to just, we start there, But then at the same time, eventually we, try to cover other areas. Let's say you're in a social space where this particular issue isn't as overt, and the tendency is like, okay, then I don't know how I'm going to engage. But I would say just start with the places where people intersect with this issue. And we always tell people, you don't need to find another space. You should be able to empower, educate, advocate, connect people into solutions where you are. And so as much as tools and empowerment we can do with that, the more stories like Kevin Kimmel, that's an inspiration to other people to do something, and especially for men. So,
thank you so much for your, we're actually going to just cut it short, sorry. But please, another round of applause for our panelists.
I want to thank all of our esteemed panelists and Supervisor Mark Riley Thomas, who was here earlier today, for dedicating the time and helping us create a platform for all of us to discuss an array of human trafficking issues and, importantly, solutions in our country. It's been a successful day thanks to all of your participation. I'm proud to announce that our event will be featured in the Neighborhood News and the LA Sentinel, and it's also recorded and uploaded online under the USC School of Social Work website. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter." That is why this is not an end, it is a beginning. We do not stop here. We can all be a part of the next step, the next action, or the next plan to eradicate human trafficking. Thank you for coming.